Just now, King Charles stuns Parliament live. Starmer left speechless. The chamber of the British Parliament was already tense long before the cameras went live, but no one expected the atmosphere to snap into utter silence the moment King Charles himself stepped forward. What unfolded just now was one of the most shocking live moments in modern political history, a moment that left Prime Minister Keir Starmer visibly frozen, the government benches unsettled, and the opposition erupting in disbelief. In a single intervention, the king shifted the energy of the entire room, and everyone watching at home felt it. It began with what was supposed to be a routine ceremonial visit. The monarch rarely intervenes directly in the political arena, and when he does, it is typically wrapped in layers of protocol and polite phrasing. But today, something was clearly different. As Charles entered, a ripple moved through the MPs, and even seasoned commentators sensed something unusual was building. There was a gravity in the king's expression, a firmness in his posture, and the immediate hush that fell across the chamber only amplified the tension. Keir Starmer stood to greet him, expecting a customary acknowledgement, but instead the king paused, fixed his gaze on the front benches, and addressed the assembly in a tone tighter and far more direct than anything heard from a British monarch in decades. The moment he spoke, the entire hall stopped breathing. Viewers watching live could almost feel the drop in temperature. What struck everyone first was the king's decision to sidestep the usual scripted remarks. He began by acknowledging the country's deep and growing unease with the current political climate. He spoke of division, distrust, and a troubling sense that public confidence in leadership was fracturing faster than the government could contain. His words were measured, but the underlying message was unmistakably sharper than anything expected from the sovereign. The government benches stiffened. Some MPs looked down at their desks. Starmer himself blinked repeatedly, as if trying to determine whether what he was hearing was truly happening. The king's next words hit even harder. Without raising his voice, he spoke of the nation's demand for accountability and transparency, emphasizing that leaders must listen not only when it is convenient, but especially when it is not. The weight of the statement was unmistakable. The message was directed squarely at the government, and the camera catching Starmer's tightened expression only intensified the moment. Across the chamber, opposition MPs exchanged glances of astonishment, while commentators online immediately exploded with theories. Was this a subtle rebuke of the Prime Minister? Was the king responding to recent controversies? Or was he simply making a broader point about political responsibility? Whatever the motive, the impact was seismic. Then came the real shock. The king turned directly towards Starmer, not aggressively but unmistakably, and noted that Britain stands at a crossroads. He continued by saying that leadership requires not only policy but courage, and that courage means addressing the issues that people worry about daily. It was a statement loaded with implications, and the live broadcast cameras zooming in on Starmer's face caught every flicker of discomfort. For a moment, the Prime Minister's expression seemed to freeze entirely. Observers inside the chamber described a strange, electrifying silence, one that didn't feel ceremonial but confrontational. Several MPs later said they had never seen a monarch speak with such pointed clarity, especially in Starmer's presence. Some even whispered that the king's tone resembled the kind of firmness typically reserved for moments of constitutional crisis, but the king's remarks did not stop there. He spoke about the economy, the growing frustration among British families, and the need for the government to address spiraling costs and slipping public services. What startled everyone most was the king's emotional emphasis, his voice tightening slightly as he referenced communities left waiting for leadership that feels present, responsive, and genuinely connected to their reality. That sentence alone triggered an audible gasp from a section of the chamber. As this unfolded, Starmer remained outwardly composed, but the tension in his jawline and the stiffness of his posture betrayed the internal shock. This was not a statement he expected, not today, not from the monarch, and certainly not live on camera in front of the entire nation. Social media immediately erupted. Millions of viewers watching the live broadcast captured clips and fired them across every platform. Within minutes, phrases like King Charles just roasted Starmer, royal shockwave in Parliament, and is this constitutional began trending. People across the country reacted with disbelief, excitement, confusion, and even concern. Some praised the king for speaking plainly at a time when frustration with the government is running high. Others criticized the moment as a breach of the traditionally neutral role of the monarchy. The reaction inside Parliament was no less dramatic. Government MPs looked stunned, unsure how to respond without drawing more attention to the rebuke. Some avoided eye contact completely. On the opposition side, MPs struggled to hide their smirks. A few even appeared to nod approvingly when the king mentioned that public trust cannot be earned with half measures or delayed promises. But then, in a twist that made the entire room tighten yet again, the king shifted his tone. He spoke about unity, resilience, and the importance of preserving the institutions that define British democracy. His message was that Britain's strength lies not in avoiding difficult truths, but in confronting them openly. And just as the chamber began to relax slightly, he added a line that instantly reignited the shock. When leadership hesitates, the nation feels it, and the nation has felt it. Starmer's eyes widened ever so slightly. A camera caught it, and that single frame is already being circulated everywhere. It was at this point that Keir Starmer tried to react, subtly adjusting his posture, preparing to respond. But before he could even attempt to speak, the king continued, moving beyond critique into what sounded almost like a challenge. He urged the government to take the bold and necessary steps the country has been waiting for, and to do so without excuses, delays, or political calculations. It was as though he had cracked open a window into the mood of the entire nation and laid it bare for everyone in the chamber to confront. There are moments in British politics that become instantly historic. The resignation of a prime minister, a shock election upset, a major constitutional ruling. Today's moment now stands among them. The reason is simple. Never in recent memory has a monarch spoken so forcefully, so directly, and with such unmistakable urgency. Outside the building, the reaction was immediate. Crowds gathered near the gates of Parliament shouted with excitement as they saw clips replayed on their phones. Journalists scrambled to get statements from MPs, many of whom dodged questions or gave vague, non-committal answers. Analysts on television struggled to place the moment within constitutional boundaries, some suggesting that this speech signals the king's growing frustration with the political atmosphere, while others argued it could spark debates about the proper role of the monarchy in modern governance. Meanwhile, political strategists noted that the timing of this intervention could not be more critical. Britain has been navigating months of rising economic pressure, public dissatisfaction, and increasingly heated political debates. Many citizens have voiced concerns about the government's slow responses and perceived disconnect from everyday struggles. The king's words today fed directly into those concerns, and in doing so, amplified them. Yet for all the shock, one thing became very clear. The king did not act spontaneously or emotionally. Every syllable sounded deliberate, considered, and delivered with a sense of responsibility. This was not a political speech. It was a national warning. After concluding his remarks, the king paused. The silence in the chamber felt heavy enough to touch. No one moved. No one whispered. Even the clicking of reporters' cameras seemed to stop. Starmer, still standing, looked as though he couldn't decide whether to speak or remain motionless. Then the king turned, nodded briefly to the speaker, and walked out. Only when the doors closed behind him did the chamber begin to breathe again. MPs exchanged whispers. Some looked rattled, others looked invigorated, and Keir Starmer remained still, absorbing the moment that had just unfolded around him. In the minutes that followed, commentators described Starmer as appearing visibly shaken, caught off guard, and momentarily speechless. The truth is, he had little choice. Any immediate reaction risked appearing defensive or disrespectful, but silence carries its own political consequences. Outside, reporters shouted questions as MPs filed out. Several opposition members openly praised the king's words as necessary and brave. Government ministers, on the other hand, offered tightly controlled responses, insisting the king's remarks were meant as general reflections on the national mood. But few believed that explanation. The tone had been too focused, the timing too precise, and the reaction from Starmer far too telling. Back in newsrooms across the country, analysts speculated on what this means for Starmer's leadership moving forward. Some argued that this moment could weaken the government's public standing, especially if people view the king's comments as a mirror of their own frustrations. Others warned that critics might use this incident to claim that the government has lost touch with the very people it claims to represent. As the footage continues to circulate, the narrative is already forming. This was not merely a ceremonial appearance. This was a turning point. A moment when King Charles stepped into the spotlight and, intentionally or not, delivered a message that echoed across the nation. A message that many citizens felt needed to be said, yet no one expected to hear from the monarch. And what happens next may define the political landscape for months to come. Will the government respond with new initiatives? Will Starmer choose to address the comments directly? Or will this moment quietly simmer, growing into a larger debate about accountability, leadership, and the state of British democracy? For now, one thing is certain. Britain witnessed something extraordinary today. A monarch speaking not just with authority, but with unmistakable urgency. A prime minister caught completely off guard, and a parliament stunned into silence as King Charles delivered a message that the entire nation is now replaying, dissecting, and interpreting.